Africa under attack. The world stunned as planes smashed through the heart of the United States.
It's got to be a terrorist attack. I can't tell you anything more than that. I saw the plane hit the building.
Pentagon also in flames. Thousands could be dead.
In Kansas City, less than 200 people. This is going to be thousands.
Celebrations in Palestine, but also sadness.
We are completely shocked.
Good evening and welcome.
Thank you so much, Simon. 13 minutes past 7 Central African time, the top stories. Fresh hopes for peace as African Union mediators announce a solution to the latest political crisis in Ivory Coast.
Condolences pour in following the death of the widow of civil rights icon Martin Luther King, Coretta Scott King.
In economic news, OPEC assures the world of continued steady oil supplies.
And in sports news, well, the drama continued at the AFCON tournament in Egypt. Surprise win for Zimbabwe.
Yep, still to come on our program, the African Development Bank's conferences in South Africa, Johannesburg, starting today and tomorrow, and Cape Town on the 6th and 7th, aimed at bringing together business people around the continent for opportunities that are there across our continent. And Mr. Felix Njoku in the Communications Department of the African Development Bank, based in Tunis, is in the country. He'll be here in the studio shortly.
Taking you back in history.
With that, it's a very good evening to you and welcome to the late edition of 2025 and a warm welcome to our SABC Plus viewers. I'm Mpho Sithole. It's an absolute pleasure to be in your company this evening as SABC News marks 75 years in the business. Let's take a look at the big stories of the day. Now, as we look at the big stories of the day, we have just seen a clip there of Peter Ndoro and the late Hope Zinde. And of course, this is all the experience of the SABC on this historic day. We're joined by two familiar faces, Mahendra, Raghunath and Peter Ndoro in studio. A lot older than what we saw on TV. I'm sorry, gentlemen.
She went there. I had a lot more hair and I was much thinner.
Well, gentlemen, good evening. Thank you so much for coming to studio. I mean, it's an absolute honor for me to have you both here. I was watching you on television. I was watching you on television, never imagining that I'd be sitting in the same studio as you. Peter, as you watched yourself there and the late Hope Zinde, just recalling a younger you, of course, and the news at the time, and a co-anchor who you worked with for several years.
Can I just tell you about that time? There was a man, and he's still alive, and he was on this morning, Phil Molife, who had a vision to start a 24-hour news channel, SABC Africa, and we were the first on the continent to do a 24-hour news channel. And I was so privileged and honored when he called me and he says, Peter, I want you to join Hope Zinde. We're going to put you on a show in the morning called 180 Degrees. And we started this thing and we set a path. All the other 24-hour news channels weren't there. We were the ones. And working with Hope for such a long time, you know, she was tough sometimes, but someone that I think that cared passionately about her work. And so I learned a lot from her. I had been coming from entertainment television up until then. I had been doing some talk radio as well. And so this was my first proper news gig. And so I learned a lot from her, and I'll always be grateful for that. But just to say that the vision that Phil Molife had at the time, and to be part of it was such a privilege and an honor. I can tell you a few stories about SABC Africa and how important it was. Maybe let me just do that quickly.
Yes.
So sometimes when you're in the studio, you're just looking into the camera and you have no idea who you're impacting and what an impression you're making.
True.
And so we had this Pan-African news channel now that broadcast across the continent. And we just had no idea who, where, and who was consuming us. And it hit me a couple of times. The first time I'd gone to Norway to do something with Kofi Annan. And I was standing there and about to do a link. And the president of Malawi at the time, Bingu wa Mutharika, walked past with his entourage. And then he caught a glimpse of me, stopped his entire entourage and came towards me.
Wow.
And said, "Young man, I see you on SABC Africa." And I just thought that that was such a confirmation of what we were doing, how important it was that we could be seen by a president of a whole country. And the other time, Rita Marley, Bob Marley's wife, she'd come to South Africa and I'd gone to a press conference, and she saw me in the audience and she says, "Peter, you're not going to ask me a question, Mr. 180," because it was 180 degrees.
Yeah.
And she was living in Ghana at the time. So I'm always grateful for those reminders of how important the work that we were doing was at that time. So great memories for me in SABC Africa. And that was my first initiation, or the first time that I was here, because I did 2 stints, but we can talk about the other one.
Yes, we will.
Yeah.
Mahendra,
Yes.
you yourself, I mean, having been on television, millions watching, at a time where 24-hour news wasn't really...
Hadn't even started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you braced the television screens. I mean, talk to us a little bit about that and some of your fondest memories as you look back at those bulletins.
Well, I'll tell you that, you know, you mentioned Phil Malife. He was actually the person who hired me as a news anchor way back in 2000, in the year 2000, 25 years ago. He was the head of news at that time, and I had come in as, on my full-time contract as a bulletin writer, a producer, the people who write the stories and check everything and, you know, package stories and put it onto the lineup. And of course, we were talking about pre-digital time. So we were working with hardcore tapes, you know, massive tapes, and then those tapes evolved over time. But to come back to the story about how I got started and, you know, the fond memories that I have, for me, it was groundbreaking for me, from my family, from my background, from a town called Durban, to come to Johannesburg.
Yeah.
And, you know, and make it big, you know, in that sense.
Yes.
But to crack an audition, because at my interview for the producer job, the executive producer, Sally de Vasconcelos, asked me, "Are you applying for this job because you want to be a news anchor?" And I said, "No." And I said, "No," because it still didn't occur to me that I could do it. You know, I needed a job, and this producer job came about, and I said, "Yeah, I'm here at the SABC, I can at least feed the family," you know. It was serious. So 2 months later, somebody left. It was Tumi Makabo. She went to CNN, and she said to us, "Goodbye, South Africa, I'm leaving, I'm going to Atlanta." And the next day, the phone didn't stop ringing, because people phoned in to say, "I want to be the next Tumi."
Right.
And I was in the background producing stories, you know, right? Running around with tapes and scripts and, you know, etc. And the executive producer called me and said to me, "We would like to invite you to audition."
Wow.
Because by then they'd heard my voice on packages and stuff, so they saw something there. So I stood in line with about 400 people that day. It was a sweltering hot day. I got in into the building at 8 in the morning. And we snaked all the way up. We came up to the 3rd floor, which is where we are now.
Yes.
And the audition actually took place in this very same studio.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a different setup. And I got my audition at 3 o'clock that afternoon. So we were sitting there, and I got to the front, and the lady said to me, the PA said to me, "That jacket is not going to work." And it was one of my best suits. But it was busy, you know, it was strobe. And so she says, "No, that," and the guy in front of me said to me, he had a lovely navy blue blazer, and he said to me, "Okay, I'm going to do my audition, and when I come out, I'll lend you my jacket." So he does his audition, he comes out and lends me his jacket, lovely blazer with gold buttons, little sweaty and wet and stuff like that. But I went in, and nothing was going to stop me. I went in and I sat there, I did the audition, I felt really good about it. And when I came out, everyone in the control room turned around, looked at me and smiled. And that was a sign, you know. And the next day, Phil Malife's PA phoned me and said to me, "You've got the job."
Wow.
So,
amazing.
yeah,
Absolutely
so
amazing.
that was that kind of
I mean,
magic.
with journalism, you mentioned the outfit. I mean, outfits are always important. I cannot believe you came with a blingy outfit hoping to do your audition. But there also came some really big stories, Peter, that were covered. Some were tragic, some were big, hot political stories. Which ones stand out for you?
Do you
as
know
you
what? I get asked that question all the time, but I have to say that all the stories were special. And I'm not just saying that. Sometimes it's being in Virginia and talking to someone who's helping the community, doesn't get celebrated. And then, of course, it's the big stories like the elections, the passing of people like Nelson Mandela, the Queen. So those are big stories that everybody talks about. But I was always moved by people who were doing amazing things, often the unsung heroes that are just so appreciative of having their story told, but they're just getting on with it anyway. You know, the ministers and all these people, we expect them to be on TV.
Yeah.
So there's so many. I mean, one can't, if you think about how many years we've been on air.
Pinpoint them,
But you know what, one guy that I really was always moved by whenever I met him was Nelson Mandela. There's just some aura that he had,
definitely.
and one can't oversay it. He really had a presence. And there have been some characters over time. Jacob Zuma, fascinating man. And again, he's another person who holds a room when he comes in. And I remember when we launched the SABC news channel that you are in now, the second incarnation, he was our very first guest.
Yes.
So that was quite a thing for us and quite an honor for us. So
massive,
I can't give you one story, but there were many over time, and all of them important in their own respect.
Absolutely.
The stories that shaped me, for example, just to pick up from Peter, I had started in the year 2000. August 3rd was the day I did my first bulletin. It was 10:30 that night, you know. And I was like really shivering, but I actually did the bulletin and I went back home and I started to show some kind of progression as we moved along. But along came September 11, 2001, exactly a year later. By then I had evolved, and I was on. By then I moved off the tiny little bulletins to the main News at 8, which was the News at 8, and a 30-minute bulletin. And the day that the September 11 attacks happened, I was at home in the morning, and then I got a call from my senior executive producer, Chris Bishop. He says to me, "Mate, you better get into the studio now. Drop what you're doing, carry a suit, and you know, you can come in, and because we've got to prepare for this big thing." I said, "What happened?" He says, "Well, you know, the Twin Towers have just been struck by airplanes, and we've got this massive show to produce tonight, and let's go, come in, let's prepare." And I dropped everything and I was here, you know, grabbed my suit, you know, and it was, you know, and we produced that 30-minute bulletin. It took us the whole day, but we had, for me, it was like a real baptism by fire. It was like, you know, you have one live interview in a 30-minute bulletin, and you know, and you get through that little conversation, and then, but in that night there were 5 live crossings to New York, to different parts of the world, and then I had a couple of live interviews in studio, and it went so beautifully and seamlessly. For me, it was like it was theater. Yeah, you know, it was real theater, and for us, it was about telling the story in the most professional manner and getting as wide a range of voices and analysts to come in and pitch in. And you know, people were like glued to the set. It was like this was a very pivotal moment in news gathering.
And I suppose that's a really good point, touching on what Peter was saying about the platform allows you to give the voiceless a voice. Really relating to real people, real life, and doing something to highlight their problem and get some sort of attention for someone to be held accountable. I mean, that in itself is a powerful position to be in.
Can I just say that public broadcasting for me is one of the most important jobs that anybody can have in their lifetime. I can't express enough how much people rely on the public broadcaster to be informed. Sometimes I think we forget that we are seen beyond our borders, and there are many regimes beyond South Africa that censor the news, that silence the opposition, and so there are many publics across the continent that tune into the SABC to get news about what's happening at home. And it is a privilege for us to have been part of telling those stories, but an important duty, I think. And I just wish that we are always mindful that it's not just a bulletin. Actually, a lot of the things that we talk about change lives. I mean, I remember when the story broke in Zimbabwe that Robert Mugabe had been ousted. To have been on air at that time, such a historic moment, and all the history and news that I had accumulated over time coming together in that moment. You know, you don't realize that at some point in time, everything that you've ever read, everything that you've ever experienced comes at that moment to be able to tell those stories.
And just to pick up from the progression that the SABC had in terms of moving away from the 30-minute bulletins and developing the 24-hour channel. The precursor and the actual training ground for the 24-hour channel happened in 2013 at the funeral of Nelson Mandela. Because for the first time we were actually broadcasting 24 hours on different channels, but we were putting out the word from the time people woke up and remembering this icon, because it was a 10-day broadcast. You know, the funeral it was actually a period of mourning, and then on the 13th of December was his burial day. And all the anchors and all the producers and the executive producers that were at the SABC suddenly found themselves in this new role of having to now produce not just 30-minute bulletins, but 3-hour segments. And we went into archives and we pulled out all of these wonderful documentaries and broadcast them well into the night. And for me, what was the most powerful broadcasting moment for me was that Saturday of the actual burial, when the body was lowered into the grave. And I had Dr. John Carney as my guest and we spoke about the cultural significance of every moment and how this, and it was so beautiful. And that moment when the coffin went down, I was actually choking. I actually choked. I couldn't read the next line. I choked. I had to bite my lip to prevent the tears from coming down.
And that's the other part of the job, because here you are telling these stories, keeping the world informed, but then you're also a human being with real emotions.
Precisely.
And that in itself, you have to present yourself in a professional way and almost be separate from the story because you're telling the story.
No, look, it's. I mean, I guess doctors, they're in theatre, they do what they do, people die and they save lives. And it is the same for us. I find that periodically I have to step back and just sort of exhale and think through, because doing the stories that you do every single day, and they're not great most of the time, sadly. So it was tough, but you know what? I always had a vision of someone really needs to hear what we're saying. And so that's what always kept me going. When I first started, and we're talking about 75 years, and we're talking about just a moment in time for us. But I remember back before 94, when we started to see black faces in white spaces, inverted commas, for the first time. People like Alice Chavunduka leading the way, being the first black woman to read news on SABC3. That was a big thing. I mean, it was huge. It was historic. And doors started to open. People started to see these faces coming through more and more over time. And I remember, even before I started, there were people I looked at and admired. Desiree Chauke, she was Desiree Makote at the time.
Yes.
And I just remember seeing the poise, the professionalism that these newsreaders had at that time. And they really set up, I think, what we take for granted now, especially at a time of transition where they were given the opportunity for the first time.
Yes.
And a lot of them expected them to fail, but they succeeded.
They had the stature.
And they opened doors, and then all of us came through. And then the poor Sitoles came through.
Yeah, and you know, Peter, you speak about former President Jacob Zuma. Of course, he's in the news quite a bit, and his aura as he came into a room. I know you were hosting the TNA breakfast briefings many years ago. And in fact, as we touch on that, just last month, the National Prosecuting Authority revealed that it's going to submit another application to have the extradition of the Guptas, another attempt. And I know that during that time, having interacted with former President Jacob Zuma, you also interacted with the Guptas. What was that like?
Where does the one begin? Do you know what? I have to remember what we were trying to do at the time. There was a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes that we weren't aware of. We were just a news team that were doing their jobs. And as a concept, they were actually a great idea. So for the first time, you had an opportunity to have the president sit down on a regular basis and have a conversation with him. And then we'd bring in ministers and have conversations with them. So as a news idea, as a news concept, it really, really was valuable at the time. Yes, the waters got muddied later, and I'm sad about that. But I think that for a time we did some important work, because we saw them in a way that we hadn't seen them before, and we tried our best, you know, to call them to account. The Guptas were fascinating for me. Atul, they were interesting, clever business people, and they had a vision as well in terms of how this project was to play out. As I said, we didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. So we just showed up, did the best we could as journalists. But as a concept, I have to say that it was good for what it did for a time. And so I was proud to be part of that period. They were characters. They were affable, and so it was very difficult to dislike them. That's pretty much all I can say before I get called to an inquiry.
Mahendra, you know, Peter's also touching on the nature of the coverage, the stories that we cover as journalists out on the ground, of course, the foot soldiers of the country, gruesome stories, political stories, I mean, also stories that speak of the people. As you look at the current news cycle, what stands out for you as you look at the coverage of the stories and the kind of news cycle we find ourselves in as journalists, trying to bring truth to accountability and people being held accountable?
Well, there's been a lot of progression in terms of, there's an intensity now that the media has in terms of focusing on the stories that affect our citizens. And the stories that we've been covering, all like the gruesome stuff, you know, the murders and the rapes and all of those things. And those are the things in my dual role as an anchor and as a producer. As a producer, I had the advantage of having to see all of these visuals, but also, you know, it was a huge shock to see a lot of the stuff. You know, it really cut deep inside. But you got to become objective about it as well. But that's just a little aside. But what I'm saying is that as broadcasters, we're exposed to a lot of things visually and also information that comes in. It's about the selectivity and the gatekeeping that takes place, and which stories do we highlight, which stories do we, you know, that we bring out. yes, there has been tremendous progress, and also the nature of the current state of affairs in this country, in terms of the political ambiance that we are now in, and the fractures, etc., that are taking place, and also the ideological shifts that are happening. We are now witnessing those, but then we also have to tell those stories. So, where do we go from here as a society? What do we as journalists do? Yes, we hold people to account, but there are also stories that that some broadcasters shy away from. But we as the SABC will continue to carry the flag of the common man, of South African citizens, the voters, all the people who are affected by everything that happens politically, from a legal perspective, all of those things.
For me, I think the biggest thing, and I'm privileged to be born at the time that I was born, because I've seen the technology change over time. And I think that that's really has been the game changer in terms of how news is presented, told. So back in the day, it was 8 o'clock at night.
Yes.
Everything was concentrated into that. 24-hour news came, then social media platforms came. And we shied away from them initially.
Yes.
But now we expect, when Mpho Sithole goes to court to cover the court case of, I don't know, whoever, Joe Bloggs, that as the court case is running, we're on your Twitter feed getting an update. And we're also expecting in studio, something is going on.
Yes.
We're expecting on radio now to see who's in the studio. So radio is no longer just you listen, now we can see. We expect to have podcasts. So many layers of telling these stories now. And it's changed the game completely. And sadly also we're competing with influencers and podcasters who are not journalists, but do journalist type things.
Yes.
And so the public broadcaster, more than ever before, public trust is the currency. People have to say, until I've seen it on the SABC, I'm not sure if it's true. And that is the thing that you have to take care of now in the 75 years that are still to come.
I mean, we're talking 27 years, 30 years in the business. As you look back and think of this incredible career, could it have been anything else?
I was an accountant before television, so had I not got the call from Phil, I think I'd be on my spreadsheets balancing books. Look, I've seen a lot of people leave and slowly come back, because if it's you and if it's what you are about, there's nothing like it. And that's my story.
Nothing happens by chance. So I know that, if I was inserted into this particular space, it was because it was meant to be. My background was academia. I was a lecturer in drama. I was a performer on stage. And, it's all those techniques that I learned as a performer, the voice training that held me in great stead. It gave me that gravitas that I could actually, to deliver the lines, so to speak. It also, it gave me as a performer the connection with the words and the story, and then the connection with the camera, because the connection with the camera is so vital, because you are now looking to the eye of the viewer, and if you look away, you're actually rejecting them. So it's so vital to maintain those protocols. So it's not just about being a performer in a studio. It's about how do you tell the story. And for me, I was like very, very privileged, very honored. I'm so grateful to the SABC, because I learned so much in the last 27 years. And I continued learning, and I continued building on the range of skills. And you don't get to do that anywhere else.
What about the people? I mean, surely having to work 3 decades, the people behind the big shows have got to be incredible people.
Oh, yes.
Wow. Do you know what? For me, I always tried very hard to establish genuine relationships with the teams that I worked with, because they were the lifeblood, and they continue to be the lifeblood of what we do. I think the public see your face, but there are 10, 15 people
Yes.
making things happen. And it was always important for me to have a good relationship with them because we were in it together.
What about the colleagues that passed away? I mean, colleagues that you worked with very closely and all of a sudden to learn that they're no longer.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there were a couple of shocks. Vuyombuli, you know, I was walking down the lifts with him on the Friday, and we were just chatting, and it's a funny thing. Somebody walked past that he hadn't seen in a while, and he stopped that person and said, "Stop, stop, stop. We need to talk more than we do. You never know what will happen in life."
Sure.
And that was just on the Friday. And then before you know what's happening, on the Saturday, your phone is ringing. "Peter, is it true? Have you heard?" And then hope, same story. So we lose, if you live long enough, you will lose colleagues over time. And it's always a shock. But you know what, I think their work will always be, when we see those clips, people will always remember the contributions that they made.
Yeah.
That's right. Talking about people, and what Peter just said about the crew, I mean, you know, I haven't been, you know, in these studios for some time, and walking into the studio today and walking in the passage and meeting all the people that I've interacted with for such a long time, you know, as a news anchor, and the kind of love and then the kind of affection that they've showed us and the respect, you know, and that connectivity that we have, because sometimes things go wrong in the studio technically. And sometimes you have to rely on the guys that are on the floor here to actually give you a heads up, you know, this is what's happening. And that has happened many times, and, you know, for the right reasons. And, you know, always grateful to them for that. But also we've developed wonderful friendships along the way, and this camaraderie that exists in these studios here at the SABC is marvelous. You know, this is the South African society that we fought so hard for.
Yeah.
This is, you know, this is Ubuntu, to be quite honest.
No, it's a beautiful place, beautiful people.
Gentlemen, with the beautiful space and the beautiful people, I want to thank you so much for coming in studio, sharing your stories, and also talking about your experiences that I'm sure a lot of people watching can relate to, can resonate with, recalling seeing you on the television screens for so many years doing incredible work. Thank you so much for coming in.
And you're doing great work.
Thank you.
Very proud to see that you've taken the torch and you're flying with it. So keep doing what you're doing. We're proud.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All
On
the
that
best,
note, as we wrap up that conversation, of course, marking the SABC News' 75th birthday, Peter Ndoro and Mahendra Raghunath in studio with us there, sharing their experiences. We do continue on the other side of this to bring you more news. Stay with us. Don't go away.